Hi everyone, Robin here, and this is part 1 of my Pokemon Black and White rewrite finale. This is gonna be the last part of the Unova rewrite, and I really hope you're gonna enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive in. It has been 2 months after Unova League, and things have changed a lot around here. Bianca decided to return to Nevada Town and decided to take on as a research assistant for Professor Universe. With Sharon, Lenora revealed that she's gonna step down as a gym leader to focus on her archaeology work. So Sharon will be taking up the mantle as the normal gym leader in Unova, but taking up in Asperger City to help with new trainers that are gonna be starting over there. Anne and the reform team Plasma has currently been working with Looker and the International Police, restoring all the damage that they did during their time as an evil group. And now Team Plasma is recognized as not an evil organization, but a group of people who work on improving the relationship between people and Pokemon. With our heroes, Ash, Hilbert and Hilda are in Metropolitan City, where they have been for the past month, doing some resting, training and planning on where they're going to go next. Ash thinks of returning back to camp to rest up at home and talking to his mother and all of his other Pokemon. However, that is when Hilbert gets a call on his X receiver, and when he looks it up, it reveals to be Professor Universe. She explained that due to Ash and Hilbert's great performance in the league, they have been eligible to participate in the Pokemon World Tournament, a tournament that is going to take place in Driftfield City, which is going to featuring high-level trainers from various regions, including gym leaders from all regions from Kanto to Unova. Being more than excited about it, Ash agreed to participate and Hilbert does the same. With their new goals in mind, they all head to Driftfield City and eventually get to the dome where they're gonna have all their battles. While there, they also run into some other familiar faces: Bianca, Sharon, and Iris. All of them wearing completely new outfits. Bianca said that she's merely here to observe Pokemon from other regions, seeing that it could help her research, but she also tells them that he's also here for a special request from Professor Universe. While they ask what it's about, she doesn't say, telling them that it's a bit of a secret for now. Sharon is here because he revealed that Lenore is going to be participating in the tournament, being her final act as a gym leader before her retirement. And Sharon will participate to test metal against her as well as other gym leaders from other regions. Iris is here because she decided that he wanted to test herself before she decided to officially take on the Alder. And if she can defeat gym leaders from other regions, she believes that taking on the Elite Four will be far easier. As they talk, Ash wonders what Pokemon he's going to use, but that is when he learns that he's allowed to register any and all Pokemon that he has owned. Hearing that, Ash gets excited, saying that it can be a great opportunity to reunite with some of his older friends. Everyone is surprised and kind of intrigued by it, seeing that other than Pikachu and Garchomp, Ash only has used Unova Pokemon, and they're wondering what other Pokemon he has had. After being registered, Ash, Hilbert, Iris, and Sharon stand along that all various challenges, including various gym leaders Ash is quite familiar with. On the stage, it revealed that Alder is the one who organized this event and hope for all fair battles. With that out of the way, Alder decided it's finally time to explain the rules. All of the training is going to be separated into 16 different groups, where the winner of each group gets to move on to the final round, where they're going to have a classic tournament bracket to determine who's the winner. The battle in the groups, as well as the one in the top 16, is going to be completely randomized between a 3v3 single battle, 2-on-2 double battle, 3-on-3 triple battle, and a 3-on-3 rotation battle. Every battle from the top 8 to the final will be a full 6-on-6 battle. And a little side note for myself here, I decided I wanted to put as much as I could into this final part, so I'm going to be doing a more visualized explanation of the battle as much as I can. I'm not going to go over every single battle in the entire tournament because that's going to take way too long. I'm mainly only going to do the ones that involve our main characters, but I'm hoping that you're going to be liking this. With all the rules and explanation out of the way, the groups are officially decided, and Ash is in Group E, while Hilbert is in Group G. The remainder of the day, Ash decided to bring over some of his old Pokemon to do some training, catching up, and learning about the new moves each of his Pokemon have learned. The following day, Ash, Hilbert, and Hilda arrive at the stadium to figure out when Ash and Hilbert is going to have their matches. However, that is when Ash hears a familiar voice, and when he looks around, he sees none other than Misty, revealing that she's here to represent the Cerulean Gym. Once Ash introduces his friends to one another, he asks who is going to be in charge of the gym, and Misty explains that every gym leader already arranged a substitute, and her sister is watching over the gym. Misty revealed that she's in Group J, meaning that neither Ash nor Hilbert can have to face her until the final round. Once they are gonna look at who their opponent's gonna be, it is then revealed that the battles in the group battles is gonna take place on 4 different battlefields: grass, ice, rock, and water. Being excited by this, Ash immediately starts looking around to find out who his opponent, as well as Hilbert and Misty. It is then revealed that Hilbert is going to take on Fantina on the grass field in a rotation battle, Misty is going to take on Brawly on the ice field in a double battle, and Ash is going to take on Forrest on the rock field in a single 3-on-3 battle. Ash and Misty are surprised seeing Brock's younger brother there, but just then, Forrest actually walks up to them, explaining that he's happy to see the two of them again. He explained that now he is officially recognized as the Pewter City gym leader, and he's wanted to take on the challenge in order to prove everyone that he's worthy of being a gym leader. He also explained that he's happy that his third opponent is going to be against Ash, seeing that if it wasn't for him, Brock may never found his true passion about being a Pokemon doctor. Ash wondered if Brock is here, but Forrest explained that Brock is too busy studying and can't actually show up in person. But he's going to be watching the match on TV, and both of them promise that they're gonna give Brock a true show. As they enter the stadium, they eventually saw several matches, and eventually it was time for Hilbert's match against Fantina of the Sinnoh region. The two of them walked up to the grass field, and they were getting ready for a rotation battle. Hilbert started out by sending out Galvantula, Braviary, and Scrafty, while Fantina sent out her trio of Drifblim, Mismagius, and Gengar. Noticing that all of them had the ability to get off the ground, either by ability of being a flying type, Hilbert knew that he gonna have to be creative how he lands attacks. The battle began, and Fantina had Drifblim starting off with an Ominous Wind, while Hilbert has Galvantula starting off with a Thunderbolt. The moves collide, but when Hilbert goes in for an Electro Whip, Fantina rotated into Mismagius, who uses Side Beam before following out with a Dark Pulse. Hilbert tried to have Galvantula go for a Bug Buzz, however, he then rotated into Gengar, who lands a Shadow Punch, which distorted his Galvantula. Realizing the game he's playing, Hilbert knows that he's gonna have to be more careful. So he rotated into Braviary, and with normal immunity Go-type moves, Gengar doesn't really have anything that can hit Braviary, so Braviary is able to fly in hard and strike with multiple aerial laces and steel wings. Eventually, Fantina decides it's time to call on a Hypnosis, which hit and caused Braviary to fall asleep. Seeing this, Hilbert quickly rotated into Scrafty before using a Scary Face, which slows Gengar down before striking with a Payback. Fantina tried to go for another Hypnosis, however, Hilbert has Scrafty using a Focus Blast, and while Gengar is immune, the Focus Blast actually stops the Hypnosis, which leaves Gengar open, which allows him to rotate back into Galvantula, firing off a Thunderbolt. Seeing the problem, Fantina has Mismagius rotate back in, firing off a Dark Pulse, but Galvantula countering it with a Bug Buzz. Just then, Braviary wakes up, and Hilbert rotating back in and striking with a combination of Aerial Ace and Steel Wing again. Fantina tried to rotate into Gengar again to use Hypnosis, however, Hilbert uses Aerial Ace to quickly get out of the way before striking Gengar with a Steel Wing from behind, which knocked Gengar to the ground, but when Gengar tried to use a Shadow Punch, Hilbert quickly rotates into Scrafty, which takes it before firing off a double-powered Payback, which knocked Gengar out. Seeing this, Fantina rotated back into Drifblim and fired off a Will-O-Wisp and Psychic combination, creating a counter shield. Surprised to seeing that combination, Hilbert tried to have Scrafty use Focus Blast to destroy it, but it does not seem to work, and Drifblim fired off the Will-O-Wisp, which hit Scrafty and burns it. She then rotates back into Mismagius and delivers a Hex, which delivered double damage because of the burn, which severely hurt Scrafty. Scrafty tried to get up, however, is unfortunately too weakened, and a Magical Leaf is able to take down Scrafty. Hilbert then rotated in Braviary once again, and once again strike with Aerial Ace and Steel Wing. However, Fantina rotated into Drifblim, which uses Ominous Wind to disturb it before hitting it with Hypnosis, which forces Ray to fall asleep. However, before Hilbert can recall it, she uses Psychic, which slams Braviary hard against the wall, knocking it out. Hilbert is now down to his last Pokemon, Galvantula. Fantina tried to rotate back into Mismagius to fire off a Side Beam. However, Galvantula uses Bug Buzz to disturb it before rushing in and lashing onto Mismagius before striking out close with a Giga Drain. The moves start draining Mismagius of energy, while he's able to knock it back with the Dark Pulse. When they fire off another Side Beam, Galvantula fires off a Bug Buzz, which tears through the attack, striking Mismagius, knocking it out. It is now down to a 1-on-1 with Galvantula versus Drifblim. Fantina uses the Psychic Will-O-Wisp counter shield again, however just then, Galvantula actually jumps on his back and starts spinning, unleashing a Thunderbolt, creating an electric counter shield. Fantina is so surprised by the counter shield, she was not able to stop it to strike him with magic. It actually disrupted the Will-O-Wisp counter shield and strike Driplim hard. As Driplim tried to fire up an ominous wind, he eventually struck with a bug butt, which is oriented, before firing up an electro web which traps it to the ground before another thunderbolt takes it out, meaning Hilbert moves on to the next round, and Fantina walks up to Hilbert and congratulating him on a well-fought battle. The battle eventually continued, and after a while it's finally time for Misty's battle against Brawly on the ice field. With that, Misty starts sending out her two Pokemon in Starmie and Politoed. She expects that Starmie only be able to move around on one of her appendages, and Politoed, able to hop around a lot, should be able to provide easy mobility on the ice field. Brawly, on the other hand, decides to go in with some heavy hitters, with Machamp and Hariyama. Actually surprised seeing Machamp, thinking that the Ramashop that he battled all that time ago had finally fully evolved. Maybe surprised to see that Brawly going with such heavy fighters, surprised that he's not going to go something that should be able to move around the ice far easier. But Brawly did not seem concerned about that. With that, the battle begins, and Misty has Politoed going for a bounce and Starmie to use a Psychic. However, Machamp and Hariyama start to slide on the ice, completely having perfect balance for all the surfing they have been doing. As they get in close, Hariyama strikes Starmie with a knockoff, and Machamp is able to strike Politoed when he's about to land with a Thunder Punch. Both moves land into him hard, which forces both of Misty Pokemon back. She is surprised by it. However, when she looked closer at Hariyama and Machamp, she noticed that their moves had affected them, just not as much as they have been taking in return. Seeing this, Misty decides that she's gonna have to use the battlefield to her advantage. Immediately calls on a double Hydro Pump, which forces the Pokemon to be on the move. However, as Hariyama and Machamp move in different directions, she has her Pokemon following Machamp. Surprisingly, both Pokemon targeting one, Misty calls on a Mega Punch and an Ice Beam. The Ice Beam connects to Machamp, and while it doesn't seem to do much initially, the Mega Punch falling close by strikes Machamp hard. Hariyama then suddenly stops to swoop in close in order to hit. However, Politoed strikes Hariyama with a Hydro Pump before Starmie fires off a Thunderbolt. The move strikes Hariyama hard. However, just then, Machamp had been able to get up and catches Starmie and delivers a powerful submission. The move lands hard and Starmie gets a bit disoriented, and Hariyama is able to break free, right Politoed with a couple of arm thrusts. Wanting to get the momentum back, Misty had Politoed use a bounce to avoid it, and have Starmie use a Psychic out herself in order to move around quickly. As Politoed starts to descend on Hariyama with a bounce, Brawly tried to have Hariyama catching it with a Vital Throw. However, just then, Misty and Politoed fire off a Focus Blast, which is soaring against Hariyama, which allows the bounce to actually land on his face. Then Politoed jumps back, and Starmie fires off an Ice Beam on the two, hitting Hariyama on his feet, which freezes it to the ground. Surprised by this, Brawly is completely caught off guard, and the two then fires up a double Hydro Pump on Machamp. However, Brawly is fully calm. He had Machamp rush in with the double Thunder Punch, as Misty had Politoed countering it with a double Mega Punch. Two Pokemon start meeting each other fist to fist. Brawly then spread his arm and called on Hariyama to use Surf. Misty is completely shocked, and suddenly Hariyama slams his hand together before suddenly calling up a gigantic wave and riding up it like it's surfing. The waves immediately getting closer towards Politoed and Starmie, so Misty had to think quickly. However, she then had an idea, and Starmie covering itself with a Psychic before rushing straight into the wave. While inside, Misty called on it to use a Thunderbolt. As it does so, the entire wave becomes electrified, traveling up it and striking Hariyama hard. As Politoed is holding off Machamp, eventually Misty calls on a Hydro Pump on Machamp's feet, which causes it to slip, and just then the big electric wave slams into it, meaning both Brawly's Pokemon are delivering a double dose of water and electricity. As the wave disappears, it reveals that both of the Pokemon are lying on the ground unconscious, revealing that not one can beat Misty when they come to water. With that, Misty moves on, and Ash complimenting her on the great battle strategy, and Misty simply smirking, saying that she got the idea from a particular trainer she knows very well. As Ash tries to ask who it is, Misty simply smiles cheekily, not telling that it's actually Ash who taught her to think like that. Then, again after a couple more battles, it's finally time for Ash's battle against Forest to begin on the rock field. We then also cut Hoops to the city, where we see Brock in his room watching the battle between his younger brother and closest friend. The battle is a 3-on-3 single match, and they start off by sending out Onix and Totodile. Ash commenting that using Onix is kind of fitting, since that was the Pokemon he had to face when he battled Brock for the first time. With that, the battle immediately begins as Onix going for a Stone Edge. However, Totodile is able to avoid it before charging in with a Waterfall. The move slams into Onix's heart. However, just then Onix goes for an Iron Tail, which knocked Totodile back. As Totodile is able to get back up again, it then calls on a Water Pledge, which travels towards Onix before it's countering it with a quick Stone Edge. It seems like Forest has a perfect defense against Water-type Pokemon, and Ash knows this battle is gonna get hot. Just then, Forest decides to call upon Sandstorm. The move immediately blinds Totodile. However, Ash immediately goes in for a Waterfall, which strikes Onix, but then Forest calls on a Sand Tomb, creating a sandy whirlwind around the Totodile, which traps it. It seems like Totodile is completely stuck. However, just then, Ash have Totodile dancing while in the sand, which is actually a move that fits Totodile to a T, being none other than Rain Dance. As the dance moves continues, the rain eventually starts pouring down, which gets rid of the sandstorm, but also loosening up the sand onto Totodile, which allows it to jump out and land as Ice Fang on its head. As Forest trying to have Onix take off Totodile, Ash has Totodile uses Onix swing to launch up a powerful waterfall, which does a loop and striking Onix straight in the head, which knocks it out. Forest thanks Onix on a battle for the spot before sending out his next Pokemon, Golem. Ash decided to have Totodile rest for a bit before sending in his next Pokemon, Tauros. The battle immediately begins as Golem going for a Rock Blast. However, Ash have Tauros deflected with Iron Head, and as Tauros starts deflecting the rock, Forest has Golem using an Earthquake, feeling the vibrations, and decide to counter it with vibration of its own and tell Tauros to use Bulldoze. The two ground moves slams into each other, which seem to cancel each other out, but creating a gigantic shockwave of their own. Just then, Forest calls on a defense curl before launching into a rollout. Ash decides to face it head on and call on a takedown. The two of them rush towards each other. However, Onix's Rocky Hide is allowing it to take the attack better, meaning Tauros is the one who takes the most of the damage. As Golem is going in for another roll, Ash have Tauros going with a double team, which confuses Golem, which actually causes it to slam in some of the rock, not destroying it, disrupting its path. Just then, Ash have Tauros turning in with a combination of Iron Head and Takedown. And this time around, this is actually able to hit Golem, which actually knocks it out of a rollout, before Ash have Tauros delivering another Bulldoze, which lands into Golem hard. Forest tried to go in for another rollout. However, this time Golem seemed to be slower, revealing the second effect of Bulldoze, lowering the opponent's speed, had kicked in. With that, Ash immediately calls on another takedown. However, with the roll being much slower, the takedown is actually winning this time, which knocked Tauros back before Tauros jumped into the air and finishing Golem off with another Iron Head. The battle is now 3-on-1, but Tauros and Totodile is quite exhausted. With that, Forest sends in his final Pokemon, Rhyperior. Without wasting any time, Forest have Rhyperior charge in with the Horn Drill. However, while Golem tried to go in with an Iron Head, it appears that Tauros is way too exhausted, and the Horn Drill slides into it, knocking it out, meaning it's actually about down to 2 Pokemon. I decide to send in Totodile again, as rain has finally seemed to stop letting up. Forest expects Ash to set out the rain again. However, Ash immediately calls on a Water Pledge. Seeing it, Forest had Rhyperior started quickly with the dig before appearing behind Totodile and firing off a Rock Breaker, which hit the little water type hard, knocking it out. With both trainers holding out 1 Pokemon left, Forest compliments that Ash has done well, but said that he should have used the rain while it had the chance as best as they can. That even if his final Pokemon wasn't a water type, the extra damage Totodile could have given would have been plenty. But with Rhyperior's solid rock ability, any super effective damage is gonna be weakened. However, Ash just smiled, saying that is not going to be the one to stop it. And with that, he sent in his final Pokemon, Torterra. Forest have Rhyperior immediately going for a dig. However, Ash had Torterra countering it with an Earth Power. After the move slams into Rhyperior hard, it forces it out before Torterra fires off an Energy Ball. The move slams into Rhyperior, but it's not taking too much damage because of solid rock. Forest trying to have Rhyperior shot in with the Mega Horn, which strikes. However, just then, Ash smiles and calls on a synthesis, healing Torterra up before he calls on a frenzy plant. The move immediately spread out. As the Force tries to dodge it with a dig, Ash has the vines go into the hole, which forces Rhyperior out. Torterra now being forced to recharge, Force tries to have Rhyperior shot in with a Mega Horn. The move lands, and Force tries to call on a second Mega Horn, but Torterra is not able to move, and Ash calls on an Energy Ball. Force seeing this, tried to have Rhyperior attack it directly, trying to cause it to detonate right into Torterra's face. But to his surprise, Ash smiles and tells Torterra to swallow it. With that, Torterra swallows the Energy Ball, increasing its grass type power. Force is completely shocked, not expecting such a move to even be possible. He tried to have Torterra use the Rock Breaker, however, Ash has Torterra use a Frenzy Plant, and as his moves collide, Frenzy Plant quickly outpowers Rock Breaker, and it completely strikes Rhyperior hard, knocking it to the wall where he lays there unconscious, meaning that the winner of the battle is none other than Ash. When the battle over, the two of them walk up to each other and shake each other's hand, with Ash telling Forrest that the Pewter Gym is in good hands with his as the leader. Back in Pewter City, Brock is watching the match and he smiles, both at his friend that won and for his brother who done an incredible job. The following day, the battle continues and it reveals that Ash will be taking on Maylene on the water field in a double battle, Hillwhip will be taking on Faulkner on the ice field in a triple battle, and Misty will be taking on Berg on the grass field in a single battle. A couple of battles later, and eventually time for Ash to start his battle against Maylene, and with that, the two of them send out their Pokemon, with Ash using Heracross and Buizel, as Maylene sent out Gallade and Lucario. Out of them, the two that are most excited about this is Lucario and Buizel, seeing how their last battle ended in a tie, and now they finally had the chance to even it up. The battle immediately begins, and Buizel charges straight in with an Aqua Jet, as Lucario counters it with a Bone Rush. Ash simultaneously have Heracross charge in with a Brick Break, however, Gallade quickly avoided and uses Psycho Cut to push it back. Buizel immediately goes for a Scald, however, Lucario quickly countering it with a Flash Cannon. Ash decided it's time to take his Pokemon's ability to account and have Buizel jump into the water, as he has Heracross start flying around. With both Pokemon out of range, Maylene starts the Pokemon come down in order to focus, and with Lucario using his Aura to sense Buizel, and what it does, it immediately fires out an Aura Sphere, forcing Buizel out. Gallade in the meantime has used a Sword Dance to boost its attack power. When Heracross goes in for a Mega Horn, it quickly countering it with a Poison Jab. I realized that he's gonna have to do a bit better if he's going to take Maylene on, and had Buizel to fire off a barrage of Sonic Booms as he had Heracross fly up high and deliver a Rock Slide. The two fighters immediately using Close Combat and Bone Rush to disable the Sonic Booms and the Rocks, and Gallade then rushes in for another Poison Jab against Buizel. However, Ash had Buizel quickly countering it with an Ice Punch. Lucario is about to fire up another Flash Cannon, however, Heracross then swoops in and uses Mega Horn to cut through it, striking Lucario. While he didn't do much, as it forced it to be on close range, Heracross delivering a volley of Brick Breaks as Lucario started countering it with the Bone Rush. The two different colors of fights go very differently, as Ash has Buizel using a Scald up close, which forcing Gallade back and even ended up burning it. On the other hand, Maylene have Lucario use its Aura to stun the Heracross Brick Break and dodge it before striking with a Force Palm, which knocks it back and even paralyzes it. With both Pokemon having one of them with a static condition, it seemed to be a dead even match. However, just then, Heracross suddenly started to flare up and his eyes glowing red, revealing Heracross' guts have activated. Seeing this as the break, Ash and Heracross started into Gallade with a Mega Horn, as Maylene tried to use a close combat to counter. However, with the burn and the guts boost, Heracross quickly demolished it, forcing Gallade to fall into the water, as Buizel started in with an Ice Punch, which started to freeze the water around it. Lucario tried to rush into help with a Bone Rush, however, Buizel quickly seized it and used the Sonic Boom to knock Lucario back. With that, I have Heracross deliver a Rock Slide on Gallade before finishing it off with a Mega Horn, meaning now it's down on 2-on-1. However, while Heracross' power is great, the paralysis still causes a problem. So when he tries to go in for a Brick Break, Lucario is able to dodge it before using a Bone Rush to destroy Heracross before an Aura Sphere takes it out. It is now down to a 1-on-1 with Buizel and Lucario, and the two fighters immediately start going at it. Start pushing each other back, having Ice Punch and Force Palm collision, Bone Rush and Sonic Booms. Buizel tries to get in close with Aqua Jet. However, Lucario used a flash cannon to keep it at bay. They collide Skull and Aura Sphere, seeming completely even. Seeing this, both of them decide it's time to charge in with all they have, having Buizel going with a combination of Aqua Jet and Ice Punch, with Lucario going in with a combination of Aura Sphere and Force Palm. The moves collide in the middle, to create a gigantic shockwave. It seemed to be a dead even match. However, just then, Ash had Buizel use a Sonic Boom aimed toward the ground. The shockwave forced the Buizel to fly up, and Lucario to lose his footing, which is enough time for Buizel to deliver 2 quick Sonic Booms, which strike Lucario hard, knocking it out. Meaning Ash officially won his meeting, and Buizel's avenge is tied. A couple more battles later, but eventually it was finally time for Misty to have her next battle against Berg on the grass field. However, when he realizes that Berg is a bug-type gym leader, she can't help but to shake. Ash is a bit worried about her, but Misty decides to stand tall when she sends out her third Pokemon, Marill, revealing that her Azurill have evolved. Berg then sent in his third Pokemon, Crustle, which gives Misty a bit of relief, seeing that she now is battling against a rock type. The battle begins, and Misty decides that she wants to end it quickly and calls on an Aqua Tail. However, Berg had Crustle use Protect to block the attack, before going in with a dig, while Misty tries to figure out where Crustle is coming from, and Crustle pops out of the ground and charges it off with an X-Scissor. Marill does what he can to avoid it, but eventually he's struck down before Crustle was jump back and prepare another X-Scissor. Seeing this now, Misty has Marill use a bounce to jump out high. However, when he tries to land an attack, Crustle's hard shell is too strong and the bounce barely did anything. Misty tries to have Marill charging in with a bunch of Aqua Tails. However, Crustle's speed allows it to easily outmaneuver Marill, and seeing that, Misty decides to switch it up and calls on an Icy Wind. The Icy Wind strikes Crustle while not doing much damage. It does have the added effect of slowing it down. But Berg doesn't realize it at first and continues to attack. However, he then decides it's time to finishing it by calling on a Rock Wrecker. However, at that point, the move had been slowed down enough so Marill can easily use the bounce to jump above it before slamming an Aqua Tail from above, which forces Crustles to fall on the back of its shell and start to struggle in order to get out. Seeing that, Berg had Crustle abandon his shell to charge in with another X-Scissor. However, that is what Misty wanted. Now, while Crustle can move faster, he is now not able to protect himself as well. So Misty immediately calls on an Icy Wind to freeze it in place before Marill jumps high with bounce and slams into the back before knocking it back to his shell with an Aqua Tail. And when Crustle slams into his shell, it reveals that he's knocked out, meaning Misty had taken the lead. Once Berg returned Crustle, he then sent in his second Pokemon, Escavalier, revealing to be a Steel type this time. Misty is a bit worried, but decides to still call an Icy Wind in hopes of slowing it down. However, Escavalier quickly avoiding it before charging in with a Swords Dance and charging in with a Poison Jab, which strikes Marill hard, knocking it out in one blow. While Crustle slammed its attack on the Marill never had that much defense in the beginning, so unfortunately it was too much. Returning it, Misty then sent in her next Pokemon, Corsola. Berg, thinking that he had advantage here, immediately calls on an Iron Head. As the move slams in hard, Misty then decided to call on a Spike Cannon to force it back before using Recover. Berg, seeing this, he is starting to have Escavalier using Sword Dance to boost the attack power before charging in with more Iron Heads. Seeing this, Misty had Corsola disrupt the path with Bubble Beam and using Recover whenever it started getting low on health. Eventually, Escavalier taking a lot of damage, but Corsola doesn't have much time to use Recover anymore. And with the one last Sword Dance, Escavalier seems to be fully charged and Berg having charging in with a Mega Horn. As the moose is about to collide, Misty had Corsola use a Bubble Beam in the ground to launch it into the air before firing off a Spike Cannon to wash the ground, which actually collides right into Escavalier. So when the dust clears, Escavalier has been defeated, revealing that all the consecutive attacks from Corsola has been enough and Escavalier could not take anymore. But with that, Berg decided to send in his final Pokemon, Leavanny. Decided to take the chance quickly, he immediately called on a Leaf Storm, but Misty had Corsola using Mirror Coat, hoping that he'd be able to reflect the attack just enough so they can only get some damage in. However, while he's able to repel the attack for a bit, it's unfortunately too much and Corsola is taking it down, but the Miracle is flying towards Leavanny, but it's the only Grace decided to put on for a bit. It did not seem to be enough to actually land the proper blow. Misty, getting a bit disappointed, returned Corsola congratulating on job well done before deciding that she is done playing around and sent in her final Pokemon, Gyarados. The battle immediately begins as Burke happily shot in with X-Scissor while Misty has Gyarados called on a Crush. The moves collide and seem to be dead even, but then Misty calls on a Hurricane while Burke had Leavanny block it with a Protect. As Gyarados tried to use the Hydro Pump, Burke had Leavanny use a Leaf Storm which counteracts it. Burke then decided it's time to call on a Hyper Beam which slams into Gyarados hard, which almost knocked it to the ground. However, Gyarados able to get it back up, and Misty immediately calls on another Hydro Pump which slams into Leavanny hard, forcing it back. Burke decided that he is done playing around and decided finally time to ending it with one last Leaf Storm. Seeing this, however, Misty smiles and decided finally time to call on Flamethrower. Burke is surprised seeing the move as Gyarados breathes out a hot scorching flame. It burns all the leaves up and strikes Leavanny hard, and with a 4 times weakness to fire, it's enough to knock it out, meaning Misty had moved on past round 2. And after that, it's finally time for Hilbert to have his next match on the ice field against Falkner of the Johto region. Being a triple battle, to just send out all their 3 other Pokemon, with Falkner sending out Pidgeot, Sawtooth, and Honchkrow, while Hilbert sending out the trio of Braviary, Musharna, and Carracosta. As the battle begins, Hilbert decides to go on the offensive right away, having Braviary using Steel Wing on Pidgeot, Musharna using Shadow Ball on Sawtooth, and Carracosta using Ancient Power on Honchkrow. However, Falkner quickly avoids it by having Pidgeot using Quick Attack to counter Braviary, having Sawtooth fire off his own Shadow Ball, and having Honchkrow use an Aerial Lead to avoid the Ancient Power in striking Musharna. Being surprised by it, Hilbert immediately goes on the offense and have Braviary attack Honchkrow with a Crush Claw as Carracosta go in with an Aqua Tail. However, just then Sawtooth appears and set up a Reflect as Pidgeot forces him back with a Tailwind. Now Falkner team has double their speed and also double defense. Just then Honchkrow flies quickly towards Braviary and fires off an Icy Wind with hit which starts slowing it down. While Hilbert is distracted, Pidgeot going for a Wing Attack on Musharna or Sawtooth uses Side Shock on Carracosta. Realizing this, Hilbert realizes that he's gonna have to play smart, having Braviary land behind Carracosta and having Carracosta serving as a shield, as Musharna then went in the lead and set up a Trick Room. Surprising Falkner thinking that is only going to make it work for his Braviary. But just then, Hilbert immediately goes on having Musharna being the main attacker, firing a Shadow Ball and Side Shock against all of Falkner's Pokemon, and Falkner does it better counter. Falkner had Pidgeot going for a Quick Attack, seeing how priority move does not get infected by Trick Room. However, when it gets close to Carracosta, Braviary appeared behind and slapped it away with a Steel Whip, showing that both Carracosta and Braviary are protecting each other as Musharna is cleaning house. Musharna and Sawtooth then go into a head-to-head with Side Shock and Shadow Ball, but then Sawtooth starting setting a Calm Mind to boost the power of Shadow Ball and Side Shock will get Hilbert a bit work. But just then he noticed something. The Trick Room is wearing off. Deciding to take the opportunity as he has Braviary recharge in with a super power on Honchkrow as Carracosta uses Shell Smash. Falkner thinks that Hilbert might have forgotten about his own Trick Room, but just then the Trick Room disappears and Braviary shoots forward with incredible speed and strikes Honchkrow before he can react. At the same time, Carracosta starts sliding on the ice to boost his speed before hitting Sawtooth with an Iron Head, but with the Reflect still up, Night Attack does too much. Decided to capitalize it, has Carracosta fire up an Ancient Power on Honchkrow, which severely injures it before a Crush Claw forces hitting an Iceberg, which takes Honchkrow out. However, Sawtooth's power becomes so strong that one more Shadow Ball is able to take down Musharna. Before Hilbert does what to do, Falkner has Pidgeot starting in with a Brave Bird, which strikes Braviary before a Side Shock knocks it out to the ground. Falkner has both of his Pokemon shot up in attack on Braviary, but just then Carracosta suddenly hoops in sliding on the ice before grabbing an ice pillar and chunking it towards Sawtooth. As Sawtooth tries to blast it away with a Shadow Ball, that gives Braviary enough time to charge in with a Steel Wing and Aerial Ace combo, which knocks it out. Seeing now it's now a 2-on-1, Falkner does not give up and have Braviary chain a Quick Attack and Wing Attack, basically creating a barrage to hit Braviary over and over before the slam in the head knocks it out. Meaning now it's down between Pidgeot and Carracosta. As Carracosta already used the Shell Smash to boost his defense, it's not going to take more damage from any attack moving forward. He'll be considering just using Shell Smash, but decide against it. Decide to play on the defensive from now on. Falkner has just charging straight in with a barrage of quick attack, wing attacks, and the occasional brave bird. However, Carracosta stayed stoic, using Aqua Tail to block quick attack and a wing attack, and have Iron to cancel out brave bird. Both of them are getting exhausted. As for this time, he's gonna finish it off with a brave bird. However, Hilbert does not do anything. He simply waits. To the moment where Pidgeot is too close, he immediately had Carracosta use Shell Smash and dash out of the way, surprising fall completely. That shock is just enough, and Carracosta fires another ancient power which strikes Pidgeot from behind, taking it out, meaning Hilbert has officially won his next battle. It is now the next day, and the next random matchup is now revealed. And third is Hilbert on the rock field against Flannery in a double battle. And then it's Ash on the ice field against Watson in a rotation battle. That Misty is first up against Gardenia on the water field in a triple battle. However, before the battle, Ash, Misty, Hilbert and Hilda are walking around, and they eventually stumble onto Gardenia, yet to Ash and the game's surprise. As they are talking, Team Rocket actually revealed to also be there. They're still attempting to try to catch a Pikachu as usual, but Gardenia actually get excited and run over to James. Misty and the gang are surprised by it, but then Gardenia throws up a Pokeball and out pops a Cacturne, which upon seeing James, immediately starts hugging it, hurting him. That feeling is so familiar to James. When he looks closer, he realizes that Cacturne is actually his Cacnea. The two of them immediately hug each other, happy to see each other after so long. Misty is a bit confused by this, and Ice explains that James had left his Cacnea with Gardenia so it could become stronger, and it appeared that it now had evolved into Cacturne. Jessie and Meow still want to attempt to capture Pikachu and their Pokemon, but James refuses, saying that now he only focuses on seeing his pal battle once again. After a couple more battles, it's finally time for Hilbert to battle, and his battle is against Flannery of the Hoenn region. The battle will take on the rock field, and it will be a double battle, and Hilbert decided to send out Carracosta and Emboar, his two power players. Flannery, on the other hand, decided to go in with two opposite Pokemon by sending in Torkoal and Ninetales, one tank and one speedster. But the moment the battle began, the intense sun started to show, and Flannery revealed this is because of Ninetales' ability, Drought, which not only put out the sun, which weakens Carracosta's water moves, but also improved the power of her fire type moves. With that, Flannery immediately called on a combination of Flamethrower and Heat Wave. Acting with swords toward them, Hilbert had Emboar stand in front and taking it before launching a Flamethrower on his own, being superpowered by the sun as well. However, just then, Torkoal started to spin around, going for Gyro Ball, while Ninetales started to use Quick Attack. The two soar towards Emboar, and while Ninetales strikes Emboar, Torkoal goes from the side and goes to attack Carracosta. But when Hilbert sees it, he had Carracosta use Aqua Tail, and unfortunately because of the sun, it becomes weakened and it becomes a far even matchup. With that, Ninetales immediately hit Emboar with the Confuse Ray, while Torkoal started firing off Sludge Bomb at Emboar. Emboar gets severely hit, while Hilbert had Carracosta use Ancient Power on Ninetales. While the attack lands, Ninetales is able to shake it off before firing off an Energy Ball at Carracosta, while Torkoal heads out with Flamethrower. Both moves land into Carracosta hard, but because Solid Rock is able to take it far better. Emboar is on the hand still confused, so it becomes quite a problem. Flannery started getting overconfident and merely tells Ninetales to strike Emboar multiple times with Quick Attack, while Torkoal starts launching Gyro Ball at Carracosta. Hilbert has Carracosta defend itself and is able to counteract the Gyro Ball with Iron Head. On Emboar's side, however, while confused, Ninetales lands multiple Quick Attacks, but eventually it's enough to actually snap Emboar out of confusion. So when Ninetales is going for another hit, Hilbert smiles and tells Emboar to use Assurance. And with Dark-type energy in his fist, it's able to strike Ninetales with double the power, knocking it back and striking into a stone, severely weakening it. Just then, Flannery knows that it decides gonna put everything in half and tell Torkoal to use Overheat. As the moose starts soaring towards Emboar, Hilbert has Carracosta use Aqua Tail to stop it. While Aqua Tail is weakened, then it's able to create a ton of steam, which is able to halt the blow of Overheat. This worries Flannery, but then Hilbert decided to call on Hammer Arms to strike at Ninetales. While Ninetales gets hit once, it's able to then get away with a Quick Attack before circling around and striking Emboar from behind. Wanting to push everything he had, Flannery calls on a combination of Heat Wave and Overheat. As the two fire moves combine with one another, it becomes a swirling blast of flame heading towards them both. Seeing the two moves charging in, Hilbert tries to have both of his Pokemon avoided, but they are not fast enough and they both get hit by the flame. Flannery thinks that he has won, but both Hilbert Pokemon are able to get back again. Surprised by why, he then notices that the sunlight has returned to normal, meaning that the fire moves has been severely weakened, but that also means Caracalla can now attack Vaughn more effectively. With that, Caracalla calls on Shell Smash, improving his speed, means an attack power, and charges Torkoal with an Aqua Tail, which does a ton of damage. Emboar decides to charge in with a Heat Crash and strikes Ninetales hard. As both of them are forced back, Hilbert immediately calls on a finishing move of Ancient Power and Flamethrower. Both moves soar towards them and land simultaneously, and in the end, both Torkoal and Ninetales are knocked out, meaning Hilbert has gone past round 3. After a while, it was finally time for Ash to have his battle against Watson of the home region on the ice field in a rotation battle. This will be Ash's ever first rotation battle. However, having done some training on the Hilbert that already has one, he's feeling more confident and sends out his 3 Pokemon, Torkoal, Noctowl, and Krookodile. Watson meanwhile sends out his 3 Pokemon, Manectric, Magnezone, and Rotom. The battle immediately begins, and Torkoal started off with a Flamethrower as Manectric dodging up a Charge Beam. The moves collide and seem to be dead even, as Manectric tried to go fun away. Ash rotated into Krookodile, who was able to take it before going for a dig. However, just then, Watson rotated into Rotom, and thanks to his levitate ability, is able to avoid it before striking Krookodile hard with a Blizzard. The attack does a lot of damage to Krookodile, but is able to shake it off before firing off a Stone Neck. Rotom uses a small statue to zip around the rocks, but a few of them manage to land, which allows Krookodile to get in close and land a Dragon Claw. Watson tried to have Rotom use another Blizzard. However, then Ash rotated into Noctowl, who is able to dodge it before it immediately set off a Nectar Sentry, who is able to hit Rotom hard. Then Watson rotated into Magnezone and immediately fires off a Flash Cannon, but Noctowl is able to avoid it and goes immediately in for an Air Slash. The attack doesn't really do much, but then Watson goes in for Lock-On. Worrying Ash, seeing that now Lock-On gonna guarantee a hit on Noctowl, Ash realizes that he need to act fast. So, he tells Noctowl to use Tailwind, and immediately the strong wind starts to blow towards Watson's team, but Watson decides to stay calm and immediately fires off a Zap Cannon. As the move soars toward Noctowl, after Noctowl using his Air Slash by spinning, creating a counter shield, which is able to slow down the Zap Cannon long enough so that once it finally reaches Noctowl, it has severely reduced speed. So the impact is not as severe as it would have been. I decided to take this opportunity and rotate into Torkoal, who is able to fire up a Flamethrower, and thanks to Tailwind, is able to move quickly and strikes Magnezone right away. Watson decided to rotate back into Manectric. However, Torkoal still had the Tailwind boost, so even when Manectric decided to go for a bite, Torkoal can quickly go into Shell while using Iron Defense and to take it for jumping up and delivering a Body Slam. Seeing the damage, Watson quickly rotated Magnezone back in an attempt to fire off a Tri-Attack. However, Ash had Torkoal go into his Shell using Iron Defense before firing off a Flamethrower, which strikes Magnezone before Ash makes a quick rotation into Krookodile, who is able to go for a dig, and before Watson has time to rotate, the dig slams into Magnezone, knocking it into an ice pillar. Once the dust is cleared, it clears that Magnezone is unable to battle, meaning Ash has managed to take the lead. But then Watson rotates Rotom back in and fire off another Blizzard. A Krookodile go for dig. However, the Blizzard is too fast and immediately hits Krookodile in the tail, causing it to get frozen. That unfortunately caused the Rotom to be able to strike with continuous Blizzard, so Krookodile is far from healthy at this point. With that, he quickly rotates Manectric back in before firing off a Flamethrower, which strikes Krookodile hard and knocking it out. Actually a bit worried, seeing that Krookodile was only really delivering super effective damage against his 2 remaining opponents. But just then, Ash noticed something. The area around where Krookodile was started to melt because of Flamethrower from Manectric. That gave Ash an idea, and he had Torkoal jump in and start firing off Flamethrowers on Watson's side of the battlefield. As the flames start to hit the field, it causes Watson's side to melt. This is causing a problem for his team. He quickly rotated into Rotom to fire a Blizzard at the water, freezing it once again. However, that is what Ash wanted, because now Rotom is distracted, so Torkoal can calmly store up power in his shell before firing off a solar beam. The move soared quickly towards Rotom and strikes it hard. It seemed to be on its last leg, so I quickly rotate back into Noctowl before firing a stream of ash lashes which takes it out. With that, one of the remaining Pokemon is Manectric. It immediately goes for a bite, but Noctowl dodges it and tries to charge in with a Sky Attack. However, Manectric fires up a Thunder Wave which slows down Noctowl just enough, so once they close in, Manectric fires up a Flamethrower which severely hurt Noctowl before a Charge Beam to shake it out. Actually now down to the last Pokemon, Torkoal, and knowing that he's gonna have to win this quickly. But at this point, the tailwind had gone out, so Torkoal gonna be slower. So I decided to continue firing out consecutive Charge Beam. So, because even if it doesn't do much damage initially, it gets stored up energy every time you use it. So it becomes stronger and stronger. I get a bit worried at seeing this. However, that's when he realizes that he can use it. Decided that Torkoal go into his shell using Iron Defense, and once Manectric tries to go in for a bite, I have Torkoal use Flamethrower, which strikes Manectric, but also causes it to slide on its shell and hitting the pillars. But that causes it to ricochet off the ice pillars and bouncing toward the other. So you pretty much start sliding all over the battlefield. Using that momentum, I was able to fire a consecutive Flamethrower from all over, which eventually start to hurt Manectric hard until Torkoal slides up one of the pillars before going in for a spinning body slam, striking Manectric hard on the back, knocking it out, meaning Ash has won his third round match and moves on. Eventually, Gardenia and Misty make their way to the battlefield and they are to reveal the 3 Pokemon. Misty sends out her 3 Pokemon, Starmie, Gyarados, and CK, revealing that Goldeen has evolved after all these years. Gardenia, on the hand, decides to send in Leafeon, Cacturne, and Roserade. Misty decides that she's not going to hold back at all, and calls on Stygian to use Mega Horn, Gyarados to use Flamethrower, and Starmie to use Ice Beam. However, Gardenia has Leafeon use Sunny Day. This confuses Misty, seeing that should improve the power of Gyarados' Flamethrower. However, just then, Gardenia have Roserade counteracting it with the Weather Ball, which becomes Fire type, which is able to cancel out the Flamethrower. Ziki on the other hand is charging towards Cacturne. However, Gardenia is calm and has Cacturne step to the side for using Drain Punch. The move is able to slam into Seeking hard and knocking it back. On the same time, Starmie's Ice Beam is able to hit Leafeon, but is able to actually shake it off, revealing that Gardenia's Leafeon is definitely trained in order to take that attack. Now it's time for Gardenia to attack, and I Cacturne and Leafeon charging in with Needle Arm and Leaf Blade. Misty decides to have Gyarados use Hurricane to blow them away, but just then, Roserade uses Grass Knot which ties Gyarados back, as the Needle Arm slams into Seeking as the Leaf Blade strikes Starmie. The two is immediately forced back, and Gyarados is able to get out of it before charging in with a crunch. But just then, Leafeon is charging in with Quick Attack, which slings into the side of Gyarados' head, forcing it to the side, with Cacturne using a Feint Attack, which strikes Gyarados with an uppercut. Misty is a bit overwhelmed. Gardenia's Pokemon all moving in perfect sync, always supporting one another. James is in the audience cheering on Cacturne, telling him to show that to her what she can do. Cacturne is more motivated than ever to show it to James, but Misty refuses to allow that to stop her. He then have all of her Pokemon enter the water, since no matter how much Gardenia's Pokemon can work together, this is still her field. Water is Misty's domain. Gardenia have her Pokemon stand back to back, deciding to covering each other. But just then, Starmie jumps out of her pool and uses Psychic, which forces Roserade to stand still. Cacturne trying to use Feint Attack to help it, but just then, Seeking jumps out of the pool and strikes Cacturne with a Mega Horn. Leafeon tries to go in with an X-Scissor, but that's when Gyarados pops up and fires off a Flamethrower, which strikes Leafeon hard, and because of that, the sun is severely damaging it. At the same time, Starmie flings Roserade towards Cacturne, causing them to slam into each other. And just then, Seeking charges in with a Waterfall, which strikes the two, knocking towards Leafeon. Gardenia have her Pokemon get up, deciding that she can have to do something quickly. Seeking immediately charges in with a Horn Attack, but Roserade steps in front of it and uses Flash, causing Seeking to get blinded. With that, Cacturne and Leafeon is able to delivering a combo move on Needle Arm and Leaf Blade, which severely damages Seeking. Misty have Gyarados and Starmie using a combination of Thunderbolt and Flamethrower to keep the two away from Seeking. But just then, Leafeon immediately charging in with another Quick Attack, seeming that Seeking is over. However, just then, Misty calls on a horn drill. The move immediately soars towards Leafeon. As the moves collide, Leafeon is quickly knocked out, with the power of horn drill being too much for it. But Seeking is clearly too exhausted, so a quick magical leap from Roserade is able to knock it out, leaving it as a 2-on-2. Cacturne immediately charging in with Feint Attack. However, Gyarados then uses Hurricane, which creates a storm around Cacturne, causing it to not be able to get close. The intense wind starts damaging it, but then Roserade tries to rush in with a Weather Ball to stop the storm, but just then, the sun has started to fade, meaning Weather Ball is now back to a normal type move, as Gyarados and Starmie is able to easily push it back with a double Hydro Pump. While water is not super effective, it's still enough to push Roserade into water, as Gyarados is able to behind it and knocking it up in the air before a blast of Flamethrower knocks it out. The wind has finally settled around Cacturne, so now we can see that Roserade is down, but Cacturne refuses to give up. Misty tried to have Flamethrower to finish it off, however Cacturne quickly dodging it before charging in with Drain Punches. It delivers several blows towards Gyarados' face, followed by a couple of Needle Arms. Misty is having Gyarados knock it back eventually, but when it's time to go for a Flamethrower, Cacturne launches a Fury of Pin Missile, which strikes Gyarados all over, before another Feint Attack straight to the face knocks Gyarados out. James can even be more happy now, cheering on his friends even louder. With that, it's now down to 1-on-1 with Starmie and Cacturne. Cacturne immediately charging in with the Needle Arm. However, Starmie immediately uses Ice Beam to freeze the ground in front of it, causing it to slide. Gardenia tried to attack Cacturne using his spike to hard into the ice to stopping it, but by the time doing that, Starmie had used its momentum to step forward before firing off an Ice Beam up close, freezing it now to the ground, meaning it's now fully stuck. Gardenia tried to attack Cacturne use a Pin Missile. While it's able to break out of the ice that way, the Ice Shock now fly all over, as Misty have Starmie use a Hydro Pump, who takes the Ice Shock with it, slamming into Cacturne hard. Refusing out though, Cacturne is able to push through it and slams a Needle Arm into Starmie. Both Pokemon are completely exhausted. With that, Cacturne immediately calls in for one last Drain Punch. Misty decides she's gonna take this opportunity well, so she waits, and just when Cacturne is about to strike, Misty has Starmie fire off a Hydro Pump toward the ground. This forces Starmie to fly up high in the air, meaning Cacturne's attack just missed it, and while in the air, Misty calls on an Ice Beam. The ice strikes Cacturne hard from above, and when it is, Cacturne is completely engulfed in an ice block, unable to battle, meaning Misty has officially won. In the audience, James is distraught. His friend has been defeated, but he can't help but to be proud that Cacturne has come so far from that same Cacturne all those years ago. After the day's battle, the gang meet up with Gardenia again, which happened to be with James and Cacturne, and the two hug each other. That is when Gardenia actually says something. She's willing to give Cacturne back to James. Misty is shocked that he will willingly give a Pokemon to Team Rocket, but Gardenia explains that no matter how much time they spend together, Cacturne will always be James's Cacnea, and keeping them apart any longer would be just cruel. James is surprised by that as well, but decides to add Cacturne where it wants. For Cacturne, this is a hard choice. It spends a lot of time with James and really finds it fun, but they also like spending time with Gardenia and all their grass type. In the end, Cacturne decides to approach and gesture that he wants to fight, thinking that a battle with James as his partner will help decide. I decide to agree, and a battle between James and Cacturne and Ash and Pikachu begins. Cacturne's power has definitely shown. However, Pikachu's speed is not to joke around with. And in the end, it comes down to a collision between Drain Punch and Iron Tail, and in the end, Pikachu is the winner. He encountered Cacturne on a battle well fought, and that battle helped Cacturne decide that it was to return to James' side. As much fun as time with Gardenia, it still miss James every day and we're more than happy to join him. So with that, the two are reunited as Cacturne is once again a part of Team Rocket and back to hugging James with his spike and harming him. The following day is finally time for the final matchup of the group battle, and it revealed that Misty is going to take on Claire in a rotation battle on the rock field, Hilbert is going to take on Lieutenant Surge in a single battle on the water field, and Ash is going to take on Jasmine in a triple battle on the grass field. Misty is a bit nervous going up against Claire since she is the stronger gym leader of the Johto region, but she promised that she's going to give it everything she has. When it's finally time for her battle, the two of them look at each other, both with determination in their eye. And with that, they send out their Pokemon, with Misty using Politoed, Corsola, and Gyarados, while Claire decides to send in Kingdra, Drodigan, and her own Gyarados. Misty noticing that Claire Drodigan is a bit different and is actually revealed to be a shiny. Nevertheless, as the battle begins, Kingdra starts by launching away a Dragon Pulse as Politoed countering it with a Focus Blast. The moves collide and seem to be quite even, but then Kingdra goes in with agility and starts moving around in very high speed. Politoed tries using Mega Punch to attack it, but Kingdra is able to move around too quick and launches a Hydro Pump which knocks Politoed back. Seeing this, it's Misty deciding to rotate into Corsola and use a Spike Cannon. However, Kingdra is able to quickly avoiding it before launching a Dragon Pulse. However, just then Misty calls on a Miracle were reflected back at Kingdra, which takes a lot of damage. Claire, seeing this, decides to rotate into Drodigan before going in with a Dragon Tail. Corsola does it better to avoid, but the tail drives Corsola and forces her back, so Misty decides to rotate in Gyarados. Gyarados immediately goes in for Hydro Pump, but Drodigan is able to tank it before launching a slash which hurts Gyarados. That's when Claire decides to rotate in her own Gyarados, and the two big water serpents start duking it out. As they continue to clash with one another, it appeared to be a dead even match, but then the two of them launched away Hydro Pump and Hyper Beam, which collide, which causes a massive explosion, but in the end, the Hyper Beam wins out and strikes Mrs. Gyarados hard. Knowing that Gyarados is gonna have to recharge, Misty rotates in Politoed again before going in for a bounce which strikes Gyarados in the face, actually causing it to become paralyzed. Claire decides to rotate into Drodigan and decides it's time to call on Outrage. Immediately goes into a flurry of blows and strikes Politoed over and over. Politoed does it better to use the Hydro Pump to force it back, but Drodigan goes straight through it and strikes Politoed until he seems to be getting on his knee. Immediately decides to rotate into Corsola now and start launching a Spike Cannon, but Drodigan is still able to land. Just then, Misty it's time to use Recover to get back some health, and just then, Drodigan becomes confused. Claire rotates Kingdra back in, and immediately goes for a Dragon Pulse. This time around, Corsola uses a Bubble Beam in order to block the attack before Corsola rushes in and lands a close-up Spike Cannon. However, Kingdra is able to fire up a Hydro Pump before the Corsola back, meaning so Misty decides to rotate Gyarados back in. Kingdra tried to launch another Dragon Pulse, however, Misty had Gyarados countering with a Flamethrower before unleashing a massive Hurricane. And being a Pokemon not very good at moving on lane, Kingdra can easily get swallowed up by it and swirl into the air before it falls onto the ground being knocked out. Gaia decides to rotate in her own Gyarados and launches an Ice Fang, which strikes Gyarados next, which immediately starts to freeze. The two water serpents had to go for another glass, but with the ice around the neck, Misty's Gyarados is at a disadvantage. So that Misty's Gyarados tries to go for Hydro Pump. However, Claire has her Gyarados dodge it before striking with a waterfall, followed by a Dragon Breath. The attack strikes Gyarados hard, which is able to knock it out. Misty then rotates into Corsola once again, who is a bit weakened, and uses Recover in order to get some health back. Claire has Gyarados immediately goes in for a fury of waterfalls and Ice Fang, occasionally getting paralyzed, allowing Corsola to counter with Spike Cannon and Bubble Beam. And Claire decides to finish off with a Hyper Beam, but Corsola uses a Miracle which reflected straight back at Gyarados, knocking it out. Now with Drodigan being her only Pokemon left, it appeared on the field. This having now snapped out of confusion, Claire immediately launches into Dragon Tail. Corsola uses Recover to get health back, but it still takes Knowing that Corsola likely won't be able to take much more, and Politoed is probably not going to be having much energy as Drodigan is now, he decided to immediately launch into a fury of Spike Cannons. The attack strikes Drodigan, but it did not seem to do too much, but Corsola just keep at it, launching more and more spikes at it. Eventually, the Drodigan able to get in close and strike a Dragon Tail, which knocks it into a pillar and knocking Corsola out. It's now down to 1-on-1 with Politoed and Drodigan. Politoed managed to rest up for a bit, and Drodigan is now exhausted, so they are pretty even level. The two of them immediately go in for a close-up fight with Mega Punch and Slash, but then Claire decides to finish it off by going for Outrage. Drodigan immediately rushes toward Politoed, but Misty had Politoed use the bounce to keep on jumping away as Drodigan keep on smashing it on the rocks on the field, eventually causing pretty much majority of them to get pummeled to pebble. It seems that Politoed has nowhere to run it, and Drodigan goes in for a finishing attack, but just then it becomes confused. Misty takes the opportunity and launches a Focus Blast which forces Drodigan back, before an hydro pump forces it straight into the wall, where he then falls on the ground unconscious, meaning Misty has won her block battle and moves on to the final round. Misty is super happy that he was able to defeat Claire, and Claire compliments Misty on the battle well fought. A couple of battles later, it is now time for Hilbert to have his final battle against Lieutenant Surge of Kento on the water field. Before the match, Lieutenant Surge makes a comment about how he'll be looking forward to face Ash again, saying how last time they battled, Ash was able to defeat him with Pikachu, and him and his partner has wanted to get a rematch. Hilbert makes a comment then saying that he's only going to be able to beat Ash if he beats him, but that won't happen. Like King Hilbert's gut, Lieutenant Surge his first Pokemon being Jolteon. As for Hilbert, he said Ingavengela, meaning the first match is a match of electric. The battle starts as Gavengela uses Thunderbolt, but Jolteon counters it with a Thunder. The two electric attacks collide, however, Jolteon seems to take no damage, while Gavengela took some severe one, revealing Jolteon's ability Voltosaur to be quite handy. Seeing that the electric move won't work, Hilbert had Gavengela go for Bug Buzz, but Jolteon quickly started with a Shadow Ball before launching a Pin Missile. Hilbert had Gavengela use an Electro Web to catch them, before launching a Giga Drain towards Jolteon, striking it and taking some help. Seeing this, Lieutenant Surge had Jolteon dash quickly. He's circling around Jolteon so he can't hit. With that, Gavengela raises its fangs up in the air and releases a Bug Buzz, which disturbs Jolteon's path, allowing Gavengela to fire off a Giga Drain which strikes. However, that is not enough. Jolteon fires off a Shadow Ball. The move collides with Gavengela, disturbing the Giga Drain. Before Jolteon fires off another round of Pin Missile, Gavengela once again uses the Electro Web to catch them. However, Lieutenant Surge has Jolteon rush into the Electro Web, and when it does, it absorbs all the electricity, restoring his health before Lieutenant Surge calls on a last resort, and the move soars towards Gavengela, knocking it into the water. That Jolteon lets loose a mighty thunder into the water, becoming an electrified pool, and while Gavengela surfaces again, it is knocked out. Hilbert returned Gavengela, thinking he did a great job, but then he decided to send in his next Pokemon, Scrafty. Lieutenant Surge tried to go for another thunder, however Hilbert had Scrafty dodge it and striking with a scary face. The strategy continued as Jolteon tried to attack, but Scrafty dodged at that moment and used a scary face multiple times, and eventually Jolteon is so slow, so when Scrafty fires up a Focus Blast, it doesn't have enough speed to avoid and gets struck hard before a Hydro Kick knocks Jolteon to the ground unconscious. Next, Lieutenant Surge in a heavy fighter in Electivire. Hilbert tried to ask Scrafty to use Scary Face again, however Electivire is here to fall on attacker, plowing into Scrafty with never stopping low kick, fire punch, and strength, hitting Scrafty multiple times. Hilbert had Scrafty use his rubber-like skin to absorb some of the damage before striking back with payback. However, it did not seem to bother Electivire. Lieutenant Surge mentioning that he had rigged Electivire defense to be able to take a brutal onslaught attack. However, Hilbert refused to give up, and with that, Scrafty collided with paybacks and Hydro Kicks against Electivire all attack. Eventually, Scrafty go for a Hydro Kick. However, Lieutenant Surge have Electivire using the twin tail to jump out of the way, meaning Scrafty hit the ground before Electivire charged into it with a wild charge, knocking it out. The match seemed to be now down to a 2-on-1, however Electivire is exhausted and does not seem to have much power left. So with that, Hilbert sent in his final Pokemon, Musharna, before firing off one last Shadow Ball, which is able to take it out, meaning Lieutenant Surge is down to his last Pokemon, and with that, he sends out Raichu. The Electric Road looks around and spots Pikachu in the crowd, making some gestures saying that once he has defeated this trainer, he's coming after him. However, Hilbert gets annoyed, saying that he shouldn't focus on that battle yet, because Lieutenant Surge and Raichu still have to beat him and Musharna. Lieutenant Surge gives a laugh, saying that will happen soon enough, and immediately tells Raichu to go in with an Iron Tail. As Raichu charges in, Hilbert and Musharna uses Shadow Ball, but the Iron Tail slices through it and strikes Musharna. Lieutenant Surge then calls for a Body Slam, but Hilbert and Musharna dodging and fire off a Side Shock, which is quickly countered with a Thunderbolt. Hilbert tried to have Musharna use Hypnosis, but Raichu quickly got out of the way before striking with a Brick Break. Lieutenant Surge mentioning that ever since his loss against Ash, he has specifically trained Raichu to use speed to his advantage, no longer relying on overwhelming power. But with the power he already had and increased speed, it is completely unbeatable. Hilbert, on the other hand, refused to believe that, saying that it's no way that can happen. But Lieutenant Surge merely laughed and said that no point to continue, and have Raichu continue his onslaught. But just then, Hilbert smiles, telling that won't happen because he still have one trick. And with that, he calls on Trick Room. The moods cover the battlefield, and Raichu becomes slow, like incredibly slow. Lieutenant Sushi frustrated about it. They questioning what happened, and Hilbert calmly explains that in Trick Room, the slowest Pokemon will always win the race. And immediately started to fire off a barrage of Psyshock and Shadow Ball. Raichu will not be able to move out of the way, try to use Iron Tail to knock the attack back, but still get hit. As Lieutenant Surge tried to Raichu sharp Ultra Thunderbolt to deliver a finishing blow, but Shadow quickly shoots in and lands a Hypnosis, meaning Raichu is now asleep, before Machado fires off a Psyshock which knocks it out, meaning Hilbert has officially won his group battle and moves on. Lieutenant Surge sighs and returns Raichu before coming out to Hilbert and giving him a handshake, telling Hilbert that he did an incredible job, and also commenting that if he ever had the time, he should swing by Vermilion City and challenge him to a gym battle, something that Hilbert is more than happy to do. Eventually, it was finally time for Ash to have his final battle against Yasmin of the Johto region, and Ash is really excited for it. Yasmin smiles as complimenting him that he has grown a lot, but that she's not going to be defeated. And so, they send out their Pokemon, with Yasmin using Scizor, Skarmory, and Steelix, while Ash to the team of Samurott, Bayleef, and Quilava. Yasmin recognizes Quilava as the same Cyndaquil that beat Steelix last time, and Steelix easily recognizes as well. With that, the battle begins, and Ash immediately had Quilava use Eruption, then Bayleef uses a Wine Whip, and Samurai go in with an Aqua Jet, almost charging towards them. However, Yasmin says having Steelix first start out with a Sandstorm, and Skarmory uses a Metal Sound, causing every one of their Pokemon to be blinded and distracted by the noise, while Skarmory swoops it in and delivers a Bullet Punch to Bayleef. Seeing that, Ash tells Bayleef to use a Body Slam on Scizor, but then Skarmory swoops in and lands an Aerial Ace, knocking it back once more. Quilava then rushes in with a rollout, but that's when Steelix pops out of the ground with a surprise dig and slams Quilava with an Iron Tail, forcing it back. Samurai tried to charge in with Razor Shell, but Scizor blocks it and delivers an Exeter. Just then Ash calls on a revenge, and Samurai lands the blow, which weakens Scizor a bit. But for the most part, Yasmin is in full control, having her Pokemon quickly power down Ash's attack before striking back with tremendous force. Realizing this, Ash decides that he needs to play smart. So with that, he has Bayleef use a Wine Whip in order to tie down Skarmory, as Quilava uses Eruption, which aims at Steelix. Both strategy works, and Eruption strikes Steelix hard, but then Yasmin has Scizor starting in with a double hit on Quilava. However, that's when Samurai jumps in front and uses Razor Shell to block it, before using an Aqua Jet which swats and hits Skarmory. Ash then has Bayleef, who still has Skarmory tied up, fling it towards Steelix, before he tells Bayleef to use a Grass Pledge to strike both of them. The move lands, but both of them manage to get out relatively far. Ash had Bayleef starting in with another Body Slam. Scizor appears and strikes it with the X-Scissor, which is super effective, forcing Bayleef back. After Samurai uses Razor Shell to counter X-Scissor, but Yasmin has Scizor use a Sword Dance to cause Scizor to be able to outpower Samurai for a bit. But then Quilava rushes in and uses Fire Pledge aimed towards Scizor, but then Yasmin has Skarmory lift Scizor quickly out of the air and fly up. Both of them start flying towards him with the Bullet Punch and Steel Whip. Seeing this, after trying to have Bayleef use Wine Whip to catch them both, but they quickly outmaneuver before slamming Quilava with a double Steel moves. With that, Steelix tried to go in for a crunch on Samurai, but Ash uses the double Dual Shot to block it before charging in with an Aqua Jet hit, which forces Steelix back. But its Scout Shell was forced away during the scuffle, and as trying to reclaim it, Skarmory unleashes a Metal Sound with distorting them before striking Samurai with a Night Slash, weakening it. The match seemed complete, making Yasmin get dropped, but Ash refused to give up. Samurai seemed to be a bit weakened, so Ash decided to have both Quilava and Bayleef work together. With that, he decided to call on a combination move of Fire Pledge and Grass Pledge. The move immediately swore towards the with Skarmory and Scizor will be able to quickly avoid because of fire. The move only ends up hitting Steelix, which does not seem to affect it too much, but all of a sudden, the floor under Steelix suddenly gets engulfed in flame. Jasmine and Ash are both in shock, not knowing what that is. A quick look at the Pokédex, revealing that it is something called Sea of Fire. And apparently, only when fire and grass are used at the same time can this effect ever be unlocked. So for the while now, all adjacent Pokemon is going to take the damage as long as they're on the ground. While this Skarmory can easily fly, eventually they're gonna get tired, and Steelix will always be on the ground no matter what. This is the lucky break I was hoping for, and as Skarmory tries to go in for a nice slash again, Quilava quickly goes in for a rollout which knocks it to the ground, causing it to get hit by the Sea of Flame. Scizor uses another Sword Dance and immediately with a double hit. However, Bailey uses a Vine Whip to catching it before flinging it up in the air and shoots it straight in with a return. The move strikes with tremendous force, knocking Scizor into Steelix, which eventually falls on the ground and getting hit by the flames as well. Jasmine tries to have Steelix use Dig, which forces it to go into the flames, but is able to eventually get away before shooting it from below. However, predicting this, Ash has all of its Pokemon jump up, and with Samura now rested up, it delivers a double Razor Shot on Steelix, severely weakening it. Then it strikes with an Aqua Jet, forcing it back to the fire side, before he has all of its Pokemon launch a combination attack, with Samura rushing in, delivering Razor Shell on Scizor, Skarmory, and Steelix, forcing all the ground, before Quilava and Bailey deliver another combination of fire and grass type, which engulf them in more Steel Fire, and when the smoke clears, all objective Pokemon are knocked out, meaning Ash has officially won his group and moves on to the final tournament. And that will be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in part 2 of the finale.